Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of these stories we have lined up for you tonight. August 1st is deadline day, and President Trump follows through on his threat to increase duties to 35% when a trade deal was not reached by Friday. Plus, a small plane crashes near the Ottawa airport, killing the pilot. 2 passengers are taken to hospital in stable condition. And professional wrestling returns to Lethbridge for the upcoming Whoop Up Days festival.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. U.S. President Donald Trump has followed through on his threat to increase duties if the U.S. didn't reach a trade deal with Canada by his August 1st deadline. This morning, he announced a 35% tariff on Canadian goods. Kelly Malone with the Canadian Press has more.
But there is a caveat that the White House has said goods that are compliant with the Canada-U.S.-Mexico Agreement on Trade will not be hit with these tariffs. So this is an exemption that was in place under the 25% tariff and will remain in place for the 35% tariff. While 35% tariffs is quite devastating for the industries that have not been able to or are unable to become CUSMA compliant. A lot of Canadian goods will still be able to go back and forth tariff-free. There's also a 10% tariff on energy and potash, which also has that CUSMA carve-out. So as long as energy and potash are CUSMA compliant, they're still passing tariff-free. The big one for Canada, which isn't changed by this 35%, is these sectoral tariffs that Trump has put in place that specifically are hitting major Canadian industries. So that's 50% on steel, 50% on aluminum, and then the automobile tariff, which does have a CUSMA carve-out, but it's only for the American parts of vehicles. So that means any vehicle finished in Canada is only being tariffed on its Canadian or Mexican parts. And then actually as of midnight, copper tariffs came into place. This was a 50% tariff, but most of the Canadian industry is feeling a bit relieved with how those turned out because it is not on kind of the raw product, which is what would have been a major impact for the Canadian industry.
Prime Minister Mark Carney says the government will try to minimize the impact of Donald Trump's new 35% tariffs and protect Canadian jobs. In a separate executive order, Trump increased his Liberation Day tariffs on many other nations, with those duties to be implemented in the next 7 days. So the question for many countries is, what's next? 2 trade experts weigh in on the status of Trump's worldwide trade war.
What's been working is showing up with a willingness to negotiate, being willing to put concessions on the table, and be able to show up with a very big promise of checks for purchases, particularly of U.S. LNG. With South Korea, it was putting shipbuilding on the table. With Japan, it was a whole host of potential investments.
Category 2, the opposite end of the spectrum, countries that are not. They may say they're negotiating, they may be cutting little deals here and there, they may be making concessions here and there, but we're not talking framework agreements anywhere. And the 2 big ones, really big, Australia and Canada.
And then look at what happened with Mexico. You had a delay of 90 days, which I think really is helpful. That will give a lot more time for the negotiations.
So it seems clear that the new normal is constant negotiation, constant refinement with different boundaries, different priorities for different countries. It's a multi-dimensional negotiation. And I think the capital markets understand that. They don't react the same way to headlines from individual trade deals the way they reacted at the beginning of the year. I think it is dawning on people that you don't change geoeconomic balance of power overnight, and you don't do it all at once.
A tariff of 10% will remain for countries that have a trade surplus with the U.S., which is most of them. About 40 nations will have trade deficits with the states at the face of 15% floor. Deals with China and Mexico, however, are still pending. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith released a statement today in response to Trump's tariff announcements. Smith says she's pleased that CUSMA-compliant goods remain tariff-free, including the vast majority of goods Alberta sells to the U.S., such as oil and gas and agricultural products. She's disappointed, though, to see tariffs on other Canadian goods increase to 35%. She says these tariffs can hurt both Canadian and American businesses and workers, and they weaken one of the most important trade and security alliances in the world. While she believes strong, consistent diplomacy is the solution, Smith says Ottawa must immediately repeal the Trudeau-era laws that restrict resource development and are holding our economy back, and diversify and grow our export markets. She goes on to say the Carney government has yet to do so, and it's costing Canada tens of millions in lost economic activity every single day. And while U.S. tariffs are affecting big business and industries, they're also affecting small businesses on both sides of the border. In New York, a beloved toy store has been forced to close its doors permanently.
We're at Westside Kids at 201 West 84th Street on the Upper West Side of Manhattan in New York City. My mom started the store in 1981. We've been a staple in this neighborhood for 44 years, but Amazon online shopping has taken over, and we just can't compete anymore, and I can't pay the bills. That's the main thing. And then the political climate and the tariffs was what did me in. It was the final nail in the coffin. You know, China's not paying it. No one else is paying it. My manufacturer, my vendors paying that tariff. They're passing it on to me, and I have to pass it on to my customer. None of us can eat that. The big guys, Walmart, Target, Amazon, can probably stockpile, bring the stuff in, you know, early on and have it for the rest of the year and avoid some of those tariffs. The little guys like myself and other small stores can't, and we don't have those pockets. So the tariffs affected us deeply. I think tomorrow is going to be hard. Today is busy and really nice. I'm seeing, you know, a lot of people are coming in. It's kind of a zoo. It's been a lot of people coming in to say goodbye, you know, bringing cookies and beans and and tomorrow is just going to be quiet. I think I'll be sad. I'll sleep in.
Bergman says she tried to sell the store at the beginning of the year. 2 potential buyers were, quote, very interested, but she says they backed out after the tariffs hit. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand is insisting Ottawa has not sent lethal weapons to Israel. The comments come days after the release of a report citing Israeli customs data that shows Canadian arms are still being exported to Israel regularly. Anand is calling the report, quote, flawed, saying items the Israel Tax Authority identified as bullets were actually paintball-style projectiles. That's despite the bullets being identified by the authority as, quote, munitions of war and parts thereof. Oh boy. The Transportation Safety Board of Canada is investigating after a small plane crashed yesterday near the Ottawa airport. Emergency crews responded to a wooded area after reports that the small plane had gone down.
What I know so far is that the aircraft is a Grumman AA-A5 privately registered aircraft based out of the Gatineau Airport. It departed the Gatineau Airport at approximately 17:35 local last night for a recreational sightseeing flight in the local area. At some point in the flight, the pilot had engine problems. The engine sputtered and failed. The right engine cowling of the aircraft came open, and there was a substantial loss of engine oil that was sprayed over the windscreen. The pilot declared an emergency with the Ottawa Control Tower Air Traffic Control, and he was cleared to land on runway 14 here in Ottawa. Unfortunately, the aircraft lost altitude and collided with terrain in behind me. 2 passengers were taken to a local hospital. Unfortunately, the pilot suffered fatal injuries and was pronounced deceased at the scene.
Crews spent the day removing the aircraft from the wooded area so the investigation could continue. A new study by Alberta government scientists says the province's regulations for cleaning up old coal mines are failing to keep aquatic ecosystems free of pollutants. The peer-reviewed study looks into contaminant levels in water near 3 inactive coal mines east of Jasper National Park. The researchers found high selenium levels in locations downstream, as well as elevated levels of other pollutants. One of the authors, a former government scientist in charge of environmental monitoring, says the paper speaks to what he calls regulatory inaction by the province. Air quality warnings are in effect for Manitoba as wildfire smoke continues to blanket much of the province. Environment Canada says Winnipeg and the city of Flin Flon in the province's northwest are expected to see air quality health index ratings of over 10. The agency also says Brandon in western Manitoba is expected to see high-risk conditions. The CFL and Winnipeg Blue Bombers say they're monitoring air quality ahead of tonight's scheduled game against the Toronto Argonauts. Here in Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Service crews from 5 stations responded to a fire at an apartment complex just off of Ashgrove Road south on Friday morning. Just before 9 a.m., crews responded to a fire at a unit on the 3rd floor and evacuated all residents in the building. Firefighters quickly knocked down the fire and contained it to the kitchen. No injuries were reported. Fire investigators say the fire was accidental. Damage is estimated to be $500,000. Residents have since been allowed back in, and LFES is reminding residents to check their smoke alarms regularly. Medicine Hat police say an investigation into voyeurism has led to child pornography charges against a 76-year-old man. The police major crime unit responded to a complaint from a woman who believed she was surreptitiously recorded while undressing in a private area of an acquaintance's residence. Police executed several search warrants, which led to the forensic examination of electronic devices. They were able to uncover evidence and additional offenses substantiating from the original complaint. Roy Jebson of Medicine Hat has been charged with 3 counts of voyeurism, as well as offenses related to the possession, making, and accessing child pornography. He has been conditionally released and will appear in court August the 13th. Lethbridge is preparing to celebrate its cultural diversity with Heritage Day 2025. On Monday, August 4th, Henderson Lake Park will become a vibrant stage for music, food, art, and traditions represented by the diverse communities that make up the human mosaic of Southern Alberta. A free, family-friendly celebration organized by the Southern Alberta Ethnic Association will coincide with its 50th anniversary of hosting the Heritage Day Festival in Lethbridge.
In 1975, for the first time in Lethbridge, few cultural groups, they got together and they celebrated Heritage Day after the government of Alberta announced it. 2 years after that, that same group of members formed Southern Alberta Ethnic Association. For the first time, we are hosting Heritage Day at Henderson Park Lake. This year, we wanted to make it more bigger. Last year at Gall Gardens, we had 5,500 attendees. This year, we're expecting more than 15,000 people to show up. We have an amazing lineup of live entertainment in the form of cultural performances, as in dances and music and songs from our member groups. Come together, join us on Heritage Day, and celebrate who we are, celebrate the diverse cultures which makes Canada a unique nation in the world.
The president of Southern Alberta Ethnic Association says the event will start at noon and run to 7 p.m. This summer has been a little different in the Southern Alberta town of Claresholm. After more than 4 decades in the community, the Claresholm Farmers Market has had to cancel the remainder of its season due to a lack of vegetable suppliers. Market manager Jackie Cooper-Blair says it was a tough decision.
Unfortunately, we found out very late in the season, before the season started, that we were losing one of our main Halterite colonies that has been joining us for over 20 years. The couple that were running their market garden had retired over the winter. So unfortunately, it was a little bit too late in the season to locate anybody else because their gardens had already been started. A farmer's market without produce is not really a farmer's market. So it was a very difficult decision to make. The last couple of years have been a challenge anyways, just with the ongoing drought in the southern Alberta area. Our main focus this year was the lack of produce. The residents are very upset. We have a lot of older people in the community that would walk or get a ride over to the farmers market location. It saved them money. We've made contacts with potential vendors for next year, making sure that they're going to be committed to joining us so that we can say yes for sure that we are going to be doing it the 2026 season.
Blair says longtime organizer Barbara Ewell has also announced her retirement from the market after 30 plus years. Blair says she wants to publicly thank her for all her hard work. Whoop Up Days is returning this month with another fan favorite. The Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center will once again host Pure Power Wrestling for its third straight year, bringing the best professional wrestling in southern Alberta to the city's largest fair for Hot Summer Night on August 22nd. The exhibition held a contract signing for the main matchup between headliners Tyler Hard Knox and Joshua Kirby for a bunkhouse brawl, no rules, anything goes fight.
It's a super great opportunity for us to really get across that pro wrestling is in southern Alberta, and it has such a big community, and obviously the community can grow more. So we're hoping to get a bunch of people that haven't seen wrestling or haven't been to wrestling for a long time to come to our regular shows. I missed last year due to injury, but the first year was probably one of my favorite shows I've ever done. And so I have high expectations for this one.
We love having Pure Power Wrestling at Whoop Up Days. This will be the third year that we've tag teamed with them to put on an event, and it just adds so much to the fair. There's such a long history of professional wrestling being part of fairs, both here in Lethbridge and around the province, around the country. And Pure Power Wrestling is one of the best independent productions out there. So to work with them, to have them come in and put on a show, it just adds so much to what we do at Whoop Up Days. To have a company like PPW here in Lethbridge, they're one of the best to do it out there. And so to work with someone local, bring that local entertainment into Whoop Up Days is exactly what we'd like to do.
Whoa. The Hot Summer Night will take place at 7 p.m. on August 22nd, and purchased tickets toward the event will include same-day admission to Whoop Up Days. Looks like a lot of fun. Well, drivers in Lethbridge will have a new traffic disruption to deal with next week. City crews will be doing service installation work near the southwest corner of Galt Gardens beginning next Tuesday, August 5th, and continuing through Friday, August the 15th. All driving lanes on 3rd Avenue between 4th Street and 5th Street will be closed. The north sidewalk along 3rd Avenue will be closed. Also, the north alleyway between 4th Street and 5th Street will not be accessible from 3rd Avenue. Motorists are reminded to drive with caution in construction zones and follow all posted detours. A lightning flash stretching across 3 U.S. states in 2017 has just been confirmed as the longest ever recorded. Scientists say the discovery is a striking example of what new satellite technology is only now able to reveal.
What we have discovered is a new record-breaking lightning flash. This world record flash extended for 829 kilometers from Texas, stretching all the way up through Missouri. We call these flashes, which are above 100 kilometers in horizontal extent, mega flashes, because they are essentially much larger than ordinary lightning flashes. They're much more impactful and much more potentially hazardous to the general public compared to just a regular random given flash. We didn't see the flash back in 2017 when it occurred because while our technology, our sensor hardware had improved by that point with the launch of the GOES 16 satellite, we still had to play some catch up with the software. We essentially were getting a fire hose of data coming down from orbit, and it's very difficult to process that amount of data, especially in short periods of time. And so this flash was essentially missed in our initial attempt to process the data simply because it was too big. It was too complicated to work with. And more recently, actually in the past year, we've developed some new methods that are able to handle lightning flashes, regardless of how big they are, regardless of the horizontal scale or the number of incremental data products that go into them. Moving to a geostationary lightning observing platform allowed us to essentially make a quantum leap in terms of our detection capabilities, where we can see all lightning flashes, regardless of where they occur on the hemisphere. And because we're in geostationary, that means that we're able to look at continuous measurements, so regardless of how rare they are. And these flashes are extremely rare, especially once we get to world record scales. We have a hope of seeing them, unlike these ground-based networks where we have to be in the right place at the right time and have an adequately sized network to do it. So we're excited to see what kinds of lightning come out of this new work, and especially as technology improves and we are able to get satellites in other parts of the world, then we'll be able to expand towards the eventual mission of providing global coverage of lightning.
That's pretty wild. Peterson says mega flashes like these are quite rare. Less than 1% of thunderstorms produce them. Wild stuff for sure. I wonder if we could ever get one of those here. There is a risk of a thunderstorm in Lethbridge this evening and again Saturday. In fact, it looks like we've got a soggy long weekend ahead of us. I will be right back with the full weather report. Well, we had a nice warm start to August, the month of August, at least southern Alberta did, and a nice warm start to our long weekend. But if you enjoyed the weather today, brace yourself because we were seeing a low pressure system move into the area and things are about to change. That mercury is going to look a little bit different. So our high today, 29. Well, on Saturday, we're only reaching a high of 19 degrees. Also, lots of moisture, 20 to 30 millimeters of rain. That should make our farmers and ranchers cheer and maybe our weekend long weekend campers tear like me. All right, and then on Sunday, seeing lots of rain showers as well, high of only 21, getting back up to the mid-20s on Monday. That's our holiday, 25 degrees, but also seeing rain showers that day as well. And then same thing on Tuesday, only 20 and rain. By the time we get to midweek next week, we're seeing highs of 27 and 26 again, and then we will see the sunshine again. Isn't that just always the case? Okay, average high for this time of year, 26, average low 11, 36 was our record high on this day happening back in 1929. 1923 and again in 53 saw the record low, which was 4 degrees. Sun rose this morning at 6:02, sunset this evening at 9:13. So yeah, we're seeing 15 hours and 13 minutes of daylight. We have 3 minutes shorter today than we had yesterday. 23 for the high in Victoria. Tomorrow, same thing for Vancouver. Edmonton is sitting under a heat warning still. That's lasting into Saturday, high of 29 degrees. Could see sunshine in the morning, then 30% chance of afternoon showers, risk of thunderstorm. Calgary, high of 23 only, and 30% chance of showers, risk of thunderstorm as well. As we get into the rest of the prairies, Saskatoon, we're seeing hazy conditions in both Saskatoon and Regina, even though we are seeing some showers in Saskatoon tomorrow, risk of thunderstorm, high of 30 degrees, high 28 in Regina tomorrow. Winnipeg, 29 degrees, still seeing some air quality warnings as well as widespread smoke tomorrow in Winnipeg. Getting to the central part of the country, both Toronto and Ottawa seeing sunshine, but then haze forming in the afternoon. So hazy afternoon in both Toronto and Ottawa. 27 for the highs there, 26 for the high in Montreal under clear skies. Looking into the Maritimes at Atlantic Canada, Fredericton, we're seeing a high of 24 degrees, clear skies, 23 in Halifax, 23 also in Charlottetown, could see some showers there, and a mix of sun and cloud in St. John's with a high of 18 degrees. There you have it. That is your forecast. Canadian industries are reacting to the 35% tariffs being imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump followed through on his threat to increase the duties if Ottawa did not make a trade deal by August the 1st. Prime Minister Mark Carney had tempered expectations of an agreement by Friday, but noted Ottawa would only agree to a deal if it serves the best interests of Canadians. Canadian Federation of Independent Business President Dan Kelly says many small and medium-sized businesses are worried about facing the brunt of the duties. Drivers crossing the 12.9-kilometer Federation Bridge linking Prince Edward Island to Canada's mainland are now paying less. Prime Minister Mark Carney has cut the average vehicle toll from over $50 to $20 to cross the bridge. The toll is only applied for vehicles leaving PEI, and rates were reduced by 50% for passengers and vehicles, while fares were frozen for commercial traffic. The federal government predicts the reductions will cost about $100 million, but would generate increased traffic and lower the cost of living. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 239 points on the day to finish at 27,020. The Dow was down 542 points to 43,588. The S&P 500 was down 101 to 6238, and the Nasdaq was down 472 points to finish at 20,650. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 201 to 67.25 US per barrel. Natural gas was up a cent to 309 US. Gold was up 74.20 to 33.6270 US an ounce, and silver was up 34 cents to 37.09 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.62 per bushel. Barley is at $6.10. Canola is at $15.49, and corn is at $7.37 per bushel. Live cattle were up $2.35 to $2.30.12. Feeder cattle were up $3.20 to $3.34.57. Lean hogs were up 22 cents to $107.35, and the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours at 72.50 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, U.S. President Donald Trump has followed through on his threat to increase duties if the U.S. did not reach a trade deal with Canada by his August 1st deadline. This morning, he announced a 35% tariff on Canadian goods. Up next, there is still a huge shortage of available childcare spaces in the country, and apparently there are daycare centers fully equipped and ready to open, but they're being stopped by so-called ideological barriers. We speak with the chair of the Association of Canadian Early Learning Programs to find out what's going on. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews.
$10 daycare has been around for a while in Canada, but the problem is there continues to be a significant shortage of spots available. So why is this the case, and can it be fixed? Joining us today from Calgary is Crystal Churcher. She's the chair of ACE, the Association of Canadian Early Learning Programs, a nonprofit coalition of licensed child care providers. So good to have you with us, Crystal.
Hi, Paul. Thank you.
You bet. How many child care spots are actually needed in Canada, and how many are available at this point?
That's a great question. I don't really know the answer to that. I think it's changing all of the time, and depending on how this funding is structured in the future, it might look a little bit different come April 1st. But roughly in Canada right now, I think we have like 980,000 childcare spaces, licensed childcare spaces. I know the goal for the federal program was to create, I believe, another like 750,000 or something along those lines, but I'm not 100% sure on those numbers.
Yeah, that's a lot. I know Prime Minister Carney is promising to create a whole bunch more, right? So has he communicated with child care providers how and when this will happen?
We have not heard from our Prime Minister yet, our new Prime Minister. We have reached out. Same with, we have a full new federal ministry as well on this file, and provincially now too in Alberta, where we've had some changes to the ministry. So we're kind of just trying to catch up a little bit with all of those political changes. And we do have some meetings coming up in the next week or so.
Okay, but there are significant shortages, right? I mean, how bad is it, I guess? You know, like what is the waiting line like?
So right now there's about 250,000 children on wait lists across Canada. So it's a significant shortage. This program created an accessibility crisis Canada-wide overnight. It wasn't well planned out as far as how to support the instant demand that it created. There was no workforce strategy. I mean, we're a heavily regulated industry. We need professionals and educators that are ready to take, the jobs and be able to staff all of these new spaces. So, there's definitely been issues with it and shortfalls for staffing, and then shortfalls for infrastructure to support the demand. So, I mean, Alberta has about a 2 to 3 year wait list on average for a facility-based daycare space. Yeah.
Are there any other provinces that are doing better? Like, what's that like across the country? I'm assuming it varies by province to province.
Yeah, province to province. I don't know if anyone's doing better. I mean, I've heard parts of Ontario waitlists are as high as 9 years.
9 years?
So,
Okay, your kid's graduating from school now. Come on.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to plan out your daycare before you even plan on having a children in Canada, in Canada right now. So,
Now, you say that there are actually centers, though, that are fully equipped, ready to open, like right now. So what is stopping them from opening? Your press release mentioned ideological barriers that are causing problems. So what do you mean by that?
well, I mean, the federal program has rolled out in full support of a public childcare system. Which sounds amazing. It is essentially, taking our mixed model childcare system across Canada and converting it overnight to something that is more similar to like our public school system. But that's, a huge shift. And the ideology behind that doesn't necessarily transfer to, I would say, real life in childcare or on the ground, kind of what we need in childcare. Different provinces have different structures of how they've run their different childcare systems. Alberta has a mixed market, so we've always had a large for-profit or private stakeholder presence in childcare. About 70% of all licensed spaces in Alberta are in those kind of private childcare centers. So to say that you're rolling out a national program that only supports maybe 30% of your childcare system in a province doesn't necessarily transfer to instant access for families. And, we have a lot of for-profit operators that are ready to invest in this space, that have invested in Alberta to create centers, who now, as of May 15th, because of the parameters of the federal program, aren't able to access the grants that parents need to get those fees down to $15 a day. That's where
So if I'm understanding you correctly, so basically the private operators are barred from these subsidies, I guess, right? That are going to make it really affordable for parents, and that's simply because of how they're structured corporately. As again, they're privately run, not completely under the public. I guess it's kind of a monopoly. I guess, a government money coming into this, right? And that's the main reason that's stopping that.
It is. I mean, there's a huge ideology behind this that somehow that nonprofit, is maybe better or provides a different level of service. I think that we need to kind of restructure how we look at that funding that's coming from the government. It isn't coming to centers. It's not coming to the operator. It's a fee replacement, essentially. So childcare costs a certain amount. Parents would usually have been paying that full amount. The government is now stepping in and funding that under the $10 a day program on behalf of parents. It's not going into the pockets of operators. So, there's needs to be a real shift, I think, in how we look at the funding and who it's meant for. Really, it's very restrictive, and parents are losing access to what they have chosen in the past for childcare options. They can't access this funding that is for them in centers that are open and ready to take them. There's no access. Or in different options like maybe preschools or day homes or different things that they have chosen in the past. It's just not available. It's more of a one-size-fits-all public.
Yeah, right. So again, if they were to change their policy and say, okay, this extra subsidy coming from the government here is going to go also to private child care centers, that would certainly open up more spaces, which is what we all want, right? So, but is it a mindset basically that, well, then maybe they're making money on a government subsidy, but you're saying it's not going for profit, it's going simply directly to the parents.
Exactly. I mean, I think that it's really important to look at this program and really look and think critically on it. It sounds really great, and the intentions behind it may be wonderful. And I think parents really do deserve affordable childcare, but there's some core fundamental issues with this program that I think we're going to have a very difficult time getting past to make it successful and to make it long term in Canada. One of them is that it isn't means tested. So under the federal parameters of this program, provinces are not allowed to means test this program, which is really what we've seen in Alberta recently. You have families across the board get access to $15 a day childcare, regardless of income. So a high income family is paying exactly the same amount for childcare as someone who's maybe a single parent. It's just not an equitable system.
I've heard that complaint quite a bit, right? You hear people saying, "Well, hold on a second. So somebody's making, six figures, and somebody else is making less than 30 grand. That's a significant difference in how you're going to live life. What you can afford and what you can't. So why would that be a flat rate? A lot of people are upset about that, and understandably so.
Yeah, I mean, one of the core pillars that the federal program is based on is universal access. And what they mean by universal access is that all families will have access to the same affordability measures. So when you get to the $10 a day, budget promise flat fee across the country, that comes at significant government funding for all families, not just the ones that would say maybe need it more than others. And I think that's where we have to look at. There's only so much money available, right? Like we're running at a significant deficit in the country. The province of Alberta was over budget by $750 million last year in this program. It's not sustainable to continue to move forward without means testing it. I mean, you're looking at a $10 a day average coming March 31st in Alberta and across Canada, which means that the governments are provincially and federally are paying the rest of the childcare fees up to that $10 a day for everyone. So, I mean, I think if we're going to talk about responsible use of public funds, we need to look at that for sure, and it should be means tested.
Oh, for sure. Okay. I know you also talk a lot about regulatory bottlenecks, compliance delays, that sort of thing, red tape. Can you explain that, unpack that a bit for us? What kind of stuff do you guys typically run into here?
I can try. I mean, I think we've seen it kind of play out in real life recently with the for-profit space cap being met on May 15th, kind of unexpectedly in Alberta. It takes about 9 months minimum, probably closer to a year and a half to open a childcare center, regardless of your corporate structure. It's not a fast process. It's heavily regulated. It's very slow moving through all of those different levels of government to get to your childcare license. And the childcare license portion of opening a center is your very last step. So before you ever talk to anybody from the children's services, the children's licensing portion, you've already done all of your construction. You've either signed your lease, built your center, you've passed all of your health, your safety, your fire. You are ready to open. You're fully operational before you ever submit that application for a childcare license. So when there's a huge policy shift, like we just saw on May 15th in Alberta, it has a massive impact to a whole bunch of people that haven't even been to that point where they would have ever been communicating with children's services. So it comes really as a surprise a lot of times. And we've kind of seen the same situation play out in Alberta multiple times in the last 3 years of being under this program.
Yeah, that's not very attractive for anybody who's thinking of starting a business. In fact, you might think, maybe I'll try a different type of business here, right? Because that doesn't look like a success model the way it's set up there by the government. So, I mean, operators, you point out in your press release here that you guys need stable, predictable funding, right? That again, will relate to the actual cost of delivering the kind of care that needs to be delivered. And then you have all these hoops to jump through, and maybe you get accepted, maybe you don't. Well, man, who's going to jump into that, right?
Yeah, it's. I mean, I've heard quite a few childcare operators call it a very hostile environment right now. It's definitely not kind of the pro-entrepreneurial spirit that we would see in Alberta for other sectors in childcare. I think that, policy-wise, that's, one issue, but the bureaucratic implementation portion of this program, we need to do a lot better in Alberta. There has been just an absolute failure in the systems and a mismanagement that is essentially going to cost a lot of people, potentially their homes, significant investment, and a mass amount of stress when if we had open lines of communication, and I think respect for the investment that people are making in these communities across Alberta, we would never be in the situation we are right now.
I understand that you and others advocate for a model of funding that should follow the family and kind of a no strings attached to provincial funding, right? Because we get federal funding, and then the provinces sometimes kind of, are maybe forced to spend it in certain ways. So what kind of strings do they actually attach? And is the federal government open to, a model that would follow the family sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think our federal government has changed. I believe that, our federal government will probably be a little bit more open to trying to navigate this system so it works past April 1st, because many people are not aware that this program, it ends March 31st in Canada. Provinces have been offered an extension by the Trudeau government just before the shift in government of 5 years extension under this program. Alberta, Ontario, and Saskatchewan have opted out of this program as of April 1st. So if we look at those numbers, our national childcare program in Canada will have less than 30% of childcare spaces participating in it come April 1st. So I think if our new government federally doesn't see that as a massive red flag that this program is not working the way it's supposed to, then they're going to be missing the boat on this. And I think it's a great opportunity to sit and really revisit why we're in the situation we are 5 years later, that why, the majority of our childcare spaces are not participating in this past March 31st, and really rework it. And hopefully we can see it go back to the parents in a way that's sustainable and provides parents with choice of where they want their children to go.
Okay, well, parents, take the time to make an appointment with your MLA, your member of parliament, and let them know how you, this needs to be communicated. So there's an opportunity here for sure. Hey, thanks for your time today, Crystal. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's always exciting to attend a wedding for a couple who are so in love. And of course, that flame typically does fade over time sometimes. And marriage can be a challenge at times as well. So joining us today to discuss marriage and how to keep the romance going is Tim Syme. He is the seniors pastor at the Evangelical Free Church in Lethbridge. Tim, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Okay, so how long have you been married, and has it all been a bed of roses for you?
Well, we're at 57 years.
Wow.
My wife and I, and there's no such thing as a bed of roses. We've been very blessed by God, but I think one of the things I've learned in life, that you're blessed because you make right decisions and right choices. It isn't that God just overrides everything. When we make right choices, the blessing of God comes, and we'd have to say that's been true of our life.
Well, romance sometimes fades in marriage, and we may not even notice the signs as they're happening. So why is that?
Well, I think it's called life.
Yeah.
Distractions start coming. You start your careers, you have children, and your life is chaotic for years raising those children, and you go through different seasons of life, and you suddenly realize that there's a lot going on, and keeping in connection with each other to build that love relationship can drift if you're not intentional about it.
Yeah. So once you do notice the signs, how should a couple respond to that? What are some of the keys to keeping the romance going?
Well, I think you have to realize again what season of life you're in, because when you're just newly married, the romance isn't that hard because you're just coming out of a dating and engagement time, and you just slip into your marriage and you keep developing that. But other responsibilities do come, and you just get busy. And when you get busy, something sacrifices in that. So I think you've got to make the decisions to how you're going to directly keep that going. And somebody told me years ago, well, it's very simple. You just throw another log on the fire, and the fire will keep burning. It doesn't have to go out. And I think that's a kind of a practical way of looking at what log do you need to throw on there right now? Do you need to get away? Do you need to read? Do you need to learn something? Do you need to change your schedule in some way?
Okay, I was going to ask you, practically speaking, what would that look like? But those are some good examples there. And would it maybe be a good suggestion to do something that you used to enjoy doing together while you were dating to maybe rekindle that flame?
Yes, if that's something that's still practical for you. When we were dating, we loved to go to Nat Park and ride the roller coaster all day. Well, when we were 40, that wasn't quite the rush in that same way. So you look at where you are and what kinds of things would you enjoy at that point in life, and make sure you just plan them in, because if you don't plan it, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. And, some marriage experts say that one of the most important things for a woman in marriage is for the man to make sure that he spends quality time with her and communicating with his wife. Is this true in your experience? And what are some ways that a man can do this?
Oh, communication is, absolutely essential. If you don't have communication, you can't resolve anything. You can't solve anything. You can't move ahead in anything. So learning the skills of communication is essential. The marriage gurus talk about communication being words that are used, tone that's used, and nonverbal that's used, and they all have different percentages. But the thing that I think is interesting is they all say the same thing, that if your nonverbal is one thing and your words are a different thing, the nonverbal wins. And so you have to start learning how that communication, and every relationship's different in the sense of learning what works for me, what works for my wife, and then intentionally doing those things.
Yeah, no, definitely. What about doing something like a double date with another couple?
Well, that's always a lot of fun. We used to do so much of that when we were dating. I think it's still valid at any stage of life when you have friends that you can go out that you enjoy being with, because what it does, it just expands everything. You got four people interacting, inputting into subjects and ideas and thoughts. We just finished a Zoom call with our friends we used to double date with in high school. And it's just like we were all back in high school. We all look older, but just doing that Zoom call, we laughed about things that we experienced and talked about things we're facing right now. And that interaction with different people is extremely valuable.
Yeah, it really is. It can be really fun to do that as well. So, I mean, we've also heard that, one of the most important things for men is to be respected. So what does that look like, practically speaking?
Yeah, that's that's something right out of Scripture, out of Ephesians, where it says, respect. And men are very vulnerable people. And when there's a sense of not being respected, that's a wound. And wounds can be the most dangerous thing, because they can separate us in the relationship in the way that comes along, and we suddenly find that we're dealing with something where there's hurts and they're not being addressed in that way. One of the things I just saw recently, which was a good reminder to me, it's always when you're out in a public setting, you can say something about your spouse and you can get a laugh because it's a bit sarcastic and it's funny. It might even be partly true, but the laugh isn't worth it.
No.
Because you wound somebody, and that is something that never allow anything that you have to deal with to be done in a public setting to make a point, because that's going to be hurtful.
Exactly. So how can a wife show respect to her husband, and also vice versa?
Well, I think it always comes down to back to the communication. Scripture talks about communicating in James chapter 1, and I've always used that pattern where it talks about being in our own relationship of coming to the place where we're quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. But in most human relationships, we totally reverse that. We get offended, so we get angry or tense, and so then we speak too much, and we're terrible at listening at that point. But listening and hearing what somebody is actually saying and what the key issue is, it often isn't what sparked a discussion or an argument. It's a building up thing, and to get to the right point so that you can actually come up with a right solution.
That sounds hard, though, too, like practically speaking.
It's work.
Yeah.
It's work.
And it seems like a daily thing as well.
Sure.
Yeah. I think there's a tendency in marriage to take the other for granted, too, sometimes. So how can we remember to notice and honor our spouse?
Yeah, that takes pretty specific attention to keep at it, because everything else will be there to kind of draw away from that. But we have to remember that there's actions, and actions really are what produce the feeling of love. That's what Corinthians talks about. Be patient, be kind. That isn't a passage to marriage, but if you took those 9 traits that it talks about there and transferred them to your marriage relationship and took the action, your spouse would feel loved.
Oh, wow. And then, of course, disagreements come up in marriage. It's inevitable. So, and it, sometimes can end up in an argument. So how can we deal with disagreements in a way that doesn't end up with angry words?
Yeah, and you have to develop your awareness of each other, of how to communicate to your specific spouse, because that's different. Some people can argue and it's just no point. Other people can argue and it's destructive because the spouse, just one of them can't handle that. If it's going back in the past or time or way they were treated in different ways, but it's coming to that place where you have to really make sure you find the time to deal with something and define again, what is that issue, and give it a very specific focus, or else you just start throwing in stuff that can't be solved because it's from months or years ago, and then you've lost track.
Yeah, good point. So how important is it for couples just to do some kind of activity together, perhaps a walk, playing sports, whatever, dancing lessons?
Yeah, it's always a great thing to find out what season you're in and what do we enjoy right now. And if that's a travel, or if that's just a relaxation day, or if that's just doing a particular thing, going out and being with people. We have our kids and our grandkids, and our greatest joy is just to find occasions when we can be with them and see and hear what's happening in their lives. It charges up both of us in the sense of, keeping a focus on our own relationship as we watch them developing their relationships at different seasons of life.
Yeah, definitely. You're quoting a lot of scripture there, and I'm just curious, what about spiritually speaking? Should couples, is it helpful for couples to spend time doing devotions together or praying together? Like, how can that work in today's busy world?
Yeah, busy is the word. And I think if you just look at the reality, the Bible isn't a marriage manual, but when it speaks about human relationships on any level, if you take those directions to human relationships and took that into the most important human relationship, which is your spouse, you would see dramatic input into your lives right away. There's an old illustration that's been used often, I've used it in premarital counseling, of the triangle where the spouse and the husband are just at the bottom, and then God is at the top of the triangle. But as you move up the triangle towards God, guess what? You're moving closer to each other. And that spiritual foundation, and I think my wife and I would both say, because of the backgrounds we came from, the only reason we're still having a great time at 57 years, which you don't plan when you're 21, but suddenly it's there, is because we continually individually move towards God, and that that moves us towards each other. And it's still true after all these years.
Yeah, it's kind of like that threefold cord is not easily broken, right? No, that's so interesting. Any final thoughts or final advice for couples who are having some marriage struggles?
Well, you know, I've always approached it from a don't just stand there, do something. If any of us woke up in the morning and we had a lump in a place where it shouldn't be, we would take action. We would call a doctor, we'd go get help. But when it comes to relationships, people just seem to think, oh, it's going to go away or it's going to get better. But the resources are unbelievable in this day and age. There's no shortage of resources, and you just have to take action. You have to learn where can I go to get the resources. And once you start doing that, you're going to get the benefit of it. So do something.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time and for your great advice today, Tim. Appreciate having you on.
Oh, my pleasure. Good to be with you.
Tim Syme is the seniors pastor at the Evangelical Free Church in Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.